Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome, Patriots, to the Raising Cain Show. Today, we welcome Captain Robert M. Cornicelli, U.S. retired, a passionate advocate for America's veterans and a strong voice against globalist agendas. With firsthand experience as a U.S. Army veteran, Cornicelli knows the challenges our heroes face, from homelessness and substance abuse to navigating the overwhelming VA system. Captain Cornicelli believes our veterans deserve top-tier care for our heroes, and he's dedicated to ensuring that they get the respect and resources they've earned more easily and more efficiently. Additionally, we're going to talk today about how the global elites are using Saul Alinsky's model of control to destabilize the West, and which is a threat that we all must confront in order to secure our nation's future. So don't miss this powerful episode. Captain Cornicelli, thank you for joining the show today, and I really appreciate you being here.
It's an honor to be here, being on your show, especially what you've gone through, being the hero that you are, because you are a hero, and all the things you've accomplished in your life. It's an honor. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me, I think I want to start. We were talking about something in the green room, and I thought it would be a great place to start our show. There was a story that I heard about that you encountered that kind of really inspired you to become a strong advocate for veterans, and it's had to do with the abuse of a veteran. Can you talk about that? Maybe that's a good starting place.
Yeah. So thank you. At the time, I guess it was around 2014, I had been transferred to the Army's Wounded Warrior Transition Program. I've gone through about 10 surgeries, but at that point I had maybe 4, and I had 4 more scheduled. So they put me in this transition unit to go through these surgeries and actually try to find an agency that I can work in while I'm going through these procedures. And it was at Fort Eustis and then at Belvoir, so it was kind of close to DC. So I started working for the DIA, and I met General Flynn. I saw he endorsed you in your commercial or your lead there. And I got there and I met him. The person who brought me in there was very close to him. It's Colonel Ott. I can't pronounce his last name. It's Ty, but it's long. Dude was bad dude, man. I mean, in a good way. Like, he was a dark individual. So he brought me, introduced me to General Flynn, and General Flynn's like, listen, it's sequestration right now. So no agencies are hiring wounded veterans or military members coming out of warrior transition units and coming out into the workplace trying to find a job. Government agencies aren't hiring. We are, because we're DOD. We didn't fall into sequestration. I want you to build me a program to find all these veterans who are getting kicked out, who still want to serve. They don't want to get kicked out, but they are, and get them here. And I'm like, I'm a captain. He's a 3-star general. Usually this is like a colonel or a 1-star that you give these programs to. So I'm like, oh, Jesus. But I did it, and I realized as I was reaching out to people, all these veterans who are like clueless of what to do when they get out, and they're panicking because we as veterans know, like I was enlisted for 8 years in the Navy, and then I was an officer. There's someone who always knows something that you can go to. And if you're a good officer and you don't know, you go to your senior enlisted, like you have that support program. They don't have that when they're coming out. So I thought about, I was getting the surgery on Long Island, and I started going to the town supervisors and saying, hey, I want to help you build a program for wounded or injured or veterans who are coming into you, service members who are retiring or becoming veterans and coming to work for you. How are you going to deal with them? Because you can't just have a regular supervisor or foreman dealing with someone with PTSD. They're going to be late. They're going to have nightmares one night. They're going to be late. When they come into work, you can't have someone screaming at them that they're an hour late. If they smell like alcohol, maybe they had a couple of drinks to help them get to sleep. You have to look at this as a different case. And it was pushback. Almost like, and this is Long Island, so it was used to be deep red. It's almost like we didn't want the trouble, and it started pissing me off. So I started a group called Veterans for a More Responsive Government, and I started going after these guys. Like I would go to every single rally or speaking event, and I would corner them. And there was this one supervisor in Smithtown who's an older guy named Pat Vecchio. He was in the Army. He had to be about 80. And he hired a veteran that I introduced him to that was in need. I mean, this guy had 4 combat deployments, lost his house coming home from one of them because his wife, he had 5 kids. His wife just couldn't handle it anymore, being gone. She lost the house. She lost the car. He came home to nothing. So I asked a supervisor to hire him. And he wasn't a problem guy. He was a master sergeant, retired. He couldn't sleep. He'd finally fall asleep at 2, 3 in the morning, and he wouldn't wake up, and he'd be late. Or he would have like a glass of wine to try to calm himself down and go to sleep. And so if you do that at 3 in the morning and you get to work at 7, you might smell like wine, right. And harass him. Plus he was Spanish. He was from Honduras, so he had an accent. He was American, but he had a deep accent. And they would badger this guy. So finally, I said I had enough, and I started going to the papers. I ran against the town chairman, the Republican chairman. I did everything I can to disrupt their little comfort, that's how these towns run, and these Republican parties, they run on patronage. They put in the zoning, the head of the zoning board and the planning commission, and then their wives open up expediting businesses, and they just circulate the money in the job, and veterans get nothing. So I really hammered hard down there, and I ended up getting a radio show in Long Island for 2 years, and I would hammer these town officials who weren't hiring veterans. I would hammer the elected officials who weren't fighting for veterans issues. So then I started, I met Lee Zeldin, who was a congressman out there, and he loved it. He didn't want to get in a fight with the town chairman, but you knew as a veteran, or he was still in the reserves, you knew he knew what we were doing. And then veterans would see you're doing this stuff, and they would come to you with more issues. And I'll give an example of one called liver fluke. You ever hear of this? Mm-hmm. So liver fluke, it's a little parasite that veterans or service members who were in Vietnam ended up getting. But what it does is it embeds itself in your liver, and it doesn't. It incubates, and it doesn't. It's in its larva stage, and then when it finally comes out, it's 40 years later. Then you start having massive liver problems, and the VA wasn't covering it, and it was only from people who are in Southeast Asia.
What's interesting, real quick, I want to just ask you about this. It's fascinating because what are the odds? I literally was reading about liver flukes yesterday. Now, I've probably not read about them ever before, but I was reading about this yesterday, and I didn't know that there was a connection with Southeast Asia. And, and folks, I know that like eating raw fish, which is something they do in Asia, is something that can lead to it. But it's fascinating that you mentioned that, and there's a lot of problems, with liver-related diseases, and then I would not be surprised to find out that our military veterans that have served in Southeast Asia, may have been exposed to that.
Well, they were, and so I would protest outside the VA like every day until I got to meet the head of the VA and the VISN for the tri-state area. And I said, I'm not going away. I will blast you on this radio show every single day until you until you start at least looking into it. And then Lee passed a bill called the liver fluke study group. I forget what it was called, and then Lee, thank God for Lee, he started really pushing into this issue. But none of this would have ever happened if I didn't get that job in DIA and see how like a 3-star general cared about veterans. Like he was looking years ahead where no one else did, saying all these people coming back from this war have nowhere to go. No one's going to understand how to deal with them. No one's going to understand what they're going through. You can't put a regular 8-hour workday and the rules that govern that 8-hour workday on someone who worked 24 hours, never know if they're going to get shelled or shot or blown up. And I was like, man, I'm going to start bringing this to all the municipalities, because the municipalities in their hometown should be hiring them when they come back. That's how I looked at it. So that's how it started. And then once I really got Long Island working the way I thought it should work with veterans, I turned it into a 501c3 called Veteran Recovery Coalition. And I focused on, I just saw the homelessness on Long Island for veterans. Mm-hmm. They lived in all these homeless shelters and no one would bring them Christmas dinners, or they could have kids on the outside and they didn't have presents. So I'd go out with my volunteers and raise 10 grand and buy every present off the kids' list, get them wrapped and give them to the parent. So the kids wouldn't know that parents didn't have the presents. We would just do anything to uplift them.
There's a couple of things that, as you're talking, I'm thinking about. One is the veterans. Obviously, if you have an injury that is visible, the VA, I think, or I should say the military does a good job of assessing that and getting you, helping you to get disability and stuff. But the problem is there's a lot of guys that have injuries that go unseen. Things like substance abuse that they never had before they got in the military. Things like, mental health problems, PTSD, and oftentimes they're things that are intermittent. They don't show up until you're under a crisis situation. And so guys will go through their out processing and that gets completely missed, and I think part of it is some of the stigma of, mental health, excuse me, mental health. And that's a real big problem. And a lot of those are the guys that I think end up at being at risk for homelessness. Plus, if you're somebody who joined the military right out of high school, and you've lived, basically lived, ate, and breathed the military your entire life, that means that you probably never had to deal with, managing your finances to, make your mortgage payment or your rent. And, a lot of these guys, they've lived in the barracks, they've never had to pay utility bills and any of that. And so there's a lot of financial problems, I think, that come out when these guys get out of the military, because it's a completely different world, and so they don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to manage that. And then if they have mental health issues on top of that, and they don't handle stress right, or maybe they turn to drinking as a means of dealing with the stress, that just makes it worse. So I think it is important that the VA needs to come up with a way to, I think, do a better job, or not the VA, but that would be the, I'm trying to remember the term when you're exiting out and they're assessing you. I think they need to do a better job, number one, of preparing soldiers for when they leave, so that they have some of those life skills outside of the military in the civilian world, and they're a little better prepared. I don't know how it is now, but when I got out, I was in the military during the Clinton years, and they were terrible at it. I mean, it was just, let's put it this way. I was given a 70% disability rating 30 years after I got out of the military, 20 years after I got out of the military. Like, for 20 years, and I tried to apply for disability 3 times and could not get through the process because it was that confusing. And then finally, and they made it just a real hurdle. Finally, I think it was it would have been during Trump's first term, was when I finally, went through the process, and I was able to get help from an advocate. and they helped me, get through all the paperwork and all of the, the stuff that I needed to get through. And that's when I finally got, seen by somebody. And then they gave me a, 70% rating, which was amazing.
You touched on several things that I hope you don't mind I comment on. One, that's what I was trying to do with the local towns, because if your local town, your local community should be concerned about their returning veterans. And they're the ones so not only am I the founder of Veteran Recovery Coalition, I'm also the national president of Veterans for America First. And the reason I hooked up with this group is because I've written several pieces of legislation to try to encourage Congress and the VA and even local municipalities to understand this more. That stuff should be coming from the local community, because they know their community better than the VA. You should put this onus on like the town, the local town supervisor and the town board. You got a returning veteran. How are you going to help them? You're collecting. If you look at your tax bill, especially like on Long Island, I think it was 65% goes to the school district, 15% or 20% to the town, and maybe 8% to the state, and an even smaller percentage to the federal government. I mean, they have the resources for this stuff. So one of the executive orders Trump should be, well, what I'm introducing soon, is that, like, remember how the governor of Maine said, we're not doing that here, and all of a sudden she caved like yesterday because he said we're not withholding your funds. Tell these towns, you're getting no federal funds unless you start figuring out ways to welcome veterans in and provide them the care, like the financial training you're talking about. They have controllers. Like, everything is there. They have a controller who could sit down with that veteran and say, hey, here's how you do this. I've worked there. It's not like they have a long day of work. They're screwing around all day long. But the other thing you talked about was, what the heck were you talking about? I wanted to talk about. You talk about PTSD and
mental health care and the stigma, with mental health. The problem is that we treat mental health as though it is somehow
I know it was.
than physical injury. But for a lot of these guys, it is a physical injury, but it's just a physical injury in their brain.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I can go on the VA app right now and say, I'm out of this medication. And this is what leads to the homelessness and the substance abuse. That's what I want to comment on, is you just hit a button and say, I'm out of my medication, and they send it. Sometimes they send 2 or 3. Like, yeah. I have no like oxycodone, but I get aspirin or Tylenol, acetaminophen, whatever they call it. I'll get that. I have maybe 5 bottles that haven't even been touched. Like, they just send it. There's no accountability. It's and this is pharma, big pharma. Just medicate.
Yeah.
I think if we find veterans in need, disabled veterans, a place where they can work and get their mind off the pain. I'm going on my 11th surgery. I'm in pain 24 hours a day. I have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. I'm miserable sometimes, but I have a great wife who understands it. When she sees me waking up angry, she'll do more. But that's because I'm married to a good person. What about the people who aren't? Right. That's up to the community. And I think Trump's going to work on this. And I see great things from Doug Collins and what he's trying to do with the VA. But every town should have a veteran working in their Veteran Affairs office who has like direct contact to the VSO for the VA in their town or their state, or the closest you can get to that town official, getting information from the VA immediately, and then helping that veteran find all the services you're talking about.
Yeah, well, that's ultimately what helped me. It was an advocate, and that was just a person who volunteers and that got some training to help with that. But they were in my community, and that's who it ultimately helped me be able to get help. And thank God I did, because it wasn't too long after that I ended up losing a job, and I was without insurance for a good period of time, and because of that I was able to get help through the VA.
The other thing you brought up was your percentage. So in this bill that I wrote, and it's long, I'll send it to you. Just don't send it out yet because I have to refine it.
Sure.
There should no one in combat who sustained an injury should come out without 100%. It should be automatic. And if the VA finds you're not, and they want to negotiate with you, which you would never negotiate, but if you should start at the top, and if they feel they were in error, they have to prove that they were in error to reduce it. You shouldn't come out with 10% and then you have to spend the next 10 years, like you were saying, you're fighting. If you were in combat, I don't care if you were blown up, shelled, shot at, you should have to prove you have PTSD. If you were in those conditions, you should have 100% service-connected disability. Yeah. And Trump should say, like, I live in South Carolina. I wanted North Carolina. My wife picked here. So I started looking at the benefits. I'm 100%. My kids can go to Clemson, USC for nothing. That should be all over the country. You want to bring in people from Syria and Palestine and have them go to
that's ridiculous.
For free. Screw that.
Yeah.
Every single 100% service-connected disabled veteran, them, their wife, their kids should go to college for free. And I'll tell you another thing, if you don't mind, because now I'm on it.
Sure.
I took the LSAT years ago, and it took me 6 or 7 tries to do it. I had to keep canceling it because I couldn't sit for long periods of time. I'd have my tailbone removed. I had 4 back surgeries. I'd set myself up for it, and then I'd have to cancel, and I kept paying. And finally, the lady, after like 6 times, the lady's like, "What the heck's wrong with you? Why do you keep canceling? You have to pay again $200 or whatever it was to set it up." And I told her my issue. She's like, "You idiot." This is the lady in the LSAT. She's like, "All you have to do is ask for accommodations, and we would have just allowed you to reschedule without charging you." I'm like, okay. So I took it, right? I used my GI Bill, but there's VRE. So when I got down here, I'm like, let me see if I can go to law school. I'm 57. I applied for VRE, got denied. Like, the guy was nasty. And he was from the South. You could tell. And I talk like an animal like this from the North. You could tell he wasn't being helpful. So I called months later, and somehow I got routed to North Carolina. And the lady's like, "Sure, I can help you. I just did this. Law school, you can use VRE for law school." I'm like, "Well, this guy told me I couldn't." "Who?" I said the name. She goes, "He doesn't work here." So what do you mean? She's like, "That's South Carolina. That's where I live." She's like, "Well, you're calling North Carolina." So, well, I get him in the wrong district, but how can you approve it and he can't, or he doesn't? She said, "Well, it's just up to that VRE counselor." So I said, "How is it up to that person to determine whether I can go to law school or not? It should be, oh, here it is, law school, check, you're good." I called back 7 or 8 months later. I got a new guy. He approved me.
Wow.
So
that's kind of the same way in how VA works too.
I interrupt you. I just want to get it off my head. It's that makes the disabled veteran, the veteran with PTSD, say, "I can't handle this."
That's exactly. Yep.
And then they go bada bing, or they start popping the pills, or they don't pay their bills and they lose the house. I just wanted to get that off my chest.
No, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is exactly what I dealt with for 20 years, trying to get help through the VA. It was a nightmare. And I would get to a point, and it was like they would dump all this extra crap on me, or I wouldn't get responses. It all depended on where I was, dealing with it. And finally, I got help through that advocate, and that made all the difference in the world. But it is really crazy to think about just how subjective those decisions are made. Right. It should be, you go down a list. Okay, this service is connected. Okay, yep, we're good. And unfortunately, it's not. It is very subjective, and that's part of the problem. So that's something that definitely needs to change. It's interesting, again, that you mentioned just another thing that I just happened to be this week. I went through my orientation for VRE. So because when I joined, and Well, this is the crazy thing. So I joined with the student loan repayment program, and I didn't realize that by accepting that I was giving up not only the GI Bill but also the Army College Fund. So I gave up both of those for basically $15,000 of student loans. Knowing what I know now, had I gone back, there was no way I would have taken that, because it was like, $40,000 of education that I gave up for $15,000 of student loan repayment. And they didn't even pay off all of my loans. They only paid off the principal. They didn't pay off the interest. And so I got screwed out of probably one of the greatest benefits that are available. I had no idea that not only did they pay for your college, but they even give you a stipend to live while you're going to college. That would have been much more advantageous to me than just having to pay off the student loans. What's that?
E5BAH you get.
Yeah. So now, so here I am, 30 years since I was in the military, or 25 years since I was in the military. And I never finished my college degree. And so, I was like, okay, I'd like to finish my college degree and be able to have a degree. So that way, when I'm looking for jobs, I'm not getting turned down because I don't have a degree, which happened to me not too long ago, because I ended up out of a job and I was looking again and applying different places, and I got turned down simply because I had no college degree. It's just insane, even though I have 27 years of experience in the field. So that's when I started looking to see, is there any kind of benefit at all within the VA because of my disability that I can, get back and maybe find some sort of educational benefit. And that's when I found out that, oh yeah, they've got this thing called VRE. Why did nobody tell me about this? Nobody even informed me about this when I was, when I got my rating. So those are the kinds of things that we can do better, and making sure that our veterans don't end up, in situations where they're not being able to utilize their full benefits.
I wrote down 3 things that I was thinking about as you were talking, as you were refreshing it in my mind. 3 things. So a guy came to, I was driving through my neighborhood. This is a brand new neighborhood here. And there was this guy washing cars. So I took a picture of his truck and I called him. His name is Cortez. He's 100% service-connected disabled. I'm like, do you know you could file for Social Security disability insurance? He goes, I didn't know that. I say, it's not like filing for unemployment or like state disability. And if you get caught like working somewhere, you paid into this. You've been paying. I'm 57. I've been paying into Social Security for 30 years. I just filed. Whether I take it or not, it's just another thing, because if I go to law school, I won't. But I just filed because I wanted to see what it was like. He didn't know. So, like you said with VRE, no one's telling people. I was watching cartoons with my little 10-year-old one day, and there was a freaking AIDS commercial on with guys kissing and hugging and talking about their life. And I'm like, you can have an AIDS commercial, which 0.01% of the population has, but you don't have commercials for veterans telling them where to go for this stuff. How about politicians start doing commercials on that? And on top of Social Security disability insurance for you're probably younger than I am. How old are you?
49.
Okay, so I'm 57. Do you know when you start so I have TRICARE for life. When you get your 100% rating, you get TRICARE for life. Means you never pay for healthcare again. When you go on Social Security disability insurance, guess what happens? Federal government puts you on Medicaid. What happens with Medicaid? You get premiums.
Wow.
So you go from, I'm going to my 11th surgery. I am in the VA all the time. I can't drive to Charleston every single day. If I go to a community care doctor, I have to give them Medicaid. Now I got to pay premiums. So in that bill that I wrote, TRICARE for life is your insurance for life. There's never a time where you need to get switched to Medicaid because you're 60. You're a veteran. You're a demographic. Medicaid and all that stuff, that's for senior citizens. I'm not a senior citizen. I'm a veteran. And I want my TRICARE for life. So that's another thing that they screw you on. And the last thing is, you were talking about your student loan. In that bill I wrote, no veteran has student loans. It goes through the VA and the VA pays it. You should never have to take out a student loan if you're a veteran. And it should be just like taking out a VA mortgage. They back it.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna cancel student debt of all these illegal aliens and people who
exactly
kids, no veteran should pay. But on top of that, I get fired up with this stuff because it annoys me. Who the hell is the government to say you have 10 years to use your GI Bill?
Yeah.
Oh, I wrote it never expires. You can use it at 80.
Exactly.
And yeah, who's the genius who said we're going to let it expire in 10 years? What if I don't want to use it in 10 years?
Yep.
I want to change my career and use it. So these are the things that non-veterans, non-service members, people who've never had a battle buddy next to them, they would never understand what veterans need.
That's
so
true.
Guys like you, me, if we don't fight for this stuff, they're going to continue to steamroll us because we don't fight.
Yeah. No, and that's the other thing too. So there's a dynamic for guys that are in the military. I mean, especially if you've been in the military your whole life, for 20 years or more, you are in it's been ingrained into you to go through your chain of command for everything. And so very rarely do you ever see somebody who's willing to advocate for themselves and fight for themselves because that's not part of their DNA. The military removed that out of them because we don't want somebody, some guy questioning orders on the battlefield. And so the tendency is people who are veterans, they don't tend to question orders. They tend to just kind of suck it up and drive on, as we were all taught. So, which is another thing, quite honestly. I think the military could do a better job of preparing veterans when they're exiting the military. Is they need to start teaching them how to advocate for themselves. So that way, when they get out, they are not. I mean, when I got out, I remember, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to just say it. I remember asking my boss, or not asking, but telling him, hey, I got to step away for a minute because I got to use the restroom. And he looks at me and he goes, you're not in the military anymore. You don't need to tell me where you're going to go use the restroom. Yeah. And it was embarrassing, but I realized, holy crap. He's right. Why do I do that? And it took me a while, to get used to not being in that strict regimented, life.
When I first got to the DIA, I was a staff officer somewhere in New York doing things there. And then I bumped into the director of operations at some veteran thing within the DIA that I was running. And this guy was a bad dude, man. His name was Mike Higgins. He was a Marine, former Marine. He was the director of operations, so 4,800 case officers all over the world, like the spy master for the DIA. I bumped into him and his deputy director, Colleen Kalina. This woman, she wasn't the pantsuit wearing woman. She had dresses every single day in heels, and she commanded authority. She was awesome. They asked me to become their XO, run the director of operation office. So now I go up there and I'm like, wow. I mean, SCS 3s, that's a 3-star general, As an SCS 3 outranks a 3-star general because, civilians always outrank military. It's the way it's designed, unless they're in command, like the director of the DIA. But I'm like, Fulberg colonels up there, 1-star generals, SCS 2s, 3s. I'm like, and I'm a captain. So the first day I'm supposed to be there, I get there. They told me 8 o'clock. Director Higgins was there at, let's say, 6:30. So I'm like, what time did this guy get in here? I can't let him come in before me. You would never let your commanding officer get in before you. You got to be up and ready. So I get there at 7:30 the next day. Now I'm living on base at Bowling Air Force Base. I get there at 7:30. He's there. I get there at 7. He's there. I'm like, friggin' son of a. So I'm like, at 6:30, I get there. Oh no, I'm driving up. He finally, because I had another operation and I couldn't walk. He got me a pass, like right up until the SES park. And I'm like, the friggin' light is on at 6:30. I was going for coffee. So the next time I got up like 5 o'clock and I sat there until I saw him get there. And he gets there every day at 6 o'clock on the dot. I started coming in 5 minutes early. So he comes in the next day and I'm there. He goes, oh, what are you doing here? All the lights are on. I said, well, you got here at 6. I'm not letting you get here before me. He gets there at 5:45. I got there the next day at 5:40. Till it went to about 5 o'clock. He's like, all right. I either have to give you a direct order or you and I are going to be here all day long, all night long, because we're trying to beat each other in. Let's both come at 6 o'clock on the dot. But it's like you said, you never let your boss walk in before you.
Yeah.
And that's your military thinking. But they're civilians now, and they do their own thing. But you're right. It's a hard thing to transition into. But if we can teach, especially the municipalities and the state leaders, how to figure out how to encompass what you go through in the military with the workplace, you'll have less homeless, less substance dependent veterans, less veterans drinking, and just make it more acceptable.
Yeah.
If you understand what you're going through, I'm not going to ask you, are you in pain today? Do you need to go out on the road and drive a 10-wheel truck? Maybe you want to do something over here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they don't care.
Well, I want to transition our conversation because we got a little bit of time left before I know you have to go. And I want to talk about, you've spoken about the globalist elites' influence. And can you explain how you see Saul Alinsky's model being used to weaken the West? Because I think obviously the military and how we treat our veterans, that's a part of it. And we've seen this like total, especially under the Biden administration, we've seen the almost complete utter destruction of our military with the introduction of all of this transgenderism stuff and weakening and, the just the kinds of things they're teaching is basically not to be better soldiers, not to be, more lethal military. They've been weakening our military by introducing all of this nonsense wokeism into the military. And that, thankfully, under our new Secretary of Defense, that's changing. But they've not just worked on the military. They've worked across our entire spectrum of all areas of our culture. Talk about that for a little bit.
So I had to pull it up because I didn't want to misspeak. If you look at Russia, the globalists they're not even getting a yard into Russia, into China.
Okay.
For the globalists to actually have control, have an open society, they got to take down China, they have to take down Russia, and they have to take down the United States of America. Europe's gone. The men are not. I just posted a video on X where Zelensky and Macron are holding each other's hands and dancing and hugging as if and they're staring into each other's eyes. Like the day of man being masculine is over in Europe. We still have somewhat masculine men left in the United States, but what the globalists have realized, and you could say they're women in infantry and combat arms nowadays, but if you look at America's history, who've died protecting this country? Men.
That's right.
Men have been the stalwart, the wall against socialism, tyranny, just anything that could take away our freedom. It's been men standing up there fighting and dying. So how do you take down this country? You can't beat us in a war. So you infiltrate and weaken men. And that's why you never hear about trans men. You always hear about trans women, men who can change their gender and play in women's sports and go into women's bathrooms. You don't hear it reversed that much. But if you can weaken men, and there's that saying, strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong men. It's true. I mean, this stuff just doesn't come out of the blue. So how do you take down this massive democracy? You weaken it from the inside. And they've been working on this since, Saul Alinsky was part of the Weather Underground. They were the guys blowing up the buildings in the 60s, and he realized we're just going to get ourselves arrested. How do we take down the society? We've got to get into the universities. And I remember in the 80s when people were like, oh, don't go to UC Berkeley, it's liberal. Go to this one. These people are saying, well, they didn't fight us taking over this university and making it totally liberal and woke. Let's move our people who are graduating here into these establishments in University of Pittsburgh, or they started infiltrating all of the universities and no one fought back. So what did they say? We got total control of the universities. Let's go into the high schools, the elementary schools. Let's go everywhere and start teaching kids you can change your gender. It's okay you can be gay if you want to be gay. It used to be in the 80s, you were born that way. Now you could just choose. So they've totally infiltrated us. And I just want to go through what Saul Alinsky based everything on, how to change a democracy into a socialist country. There are these 8 levels of control. Healthcare. Now that should raise an alarm right away. Who pushed universal healthcare? Obama. Right? Wasn't that a big thing? We got to, and Hillary, we have to control healthcare. Control healthcare and you control the people. Poverty. Increase poverty levels as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control. Don't we have a huge wage gap here? Like we have 34% of our population lives at or below the poverty level. That's enormous. Debt. I mean, doesn't this stuff strike you? Debt. You have to be in debt for the country or the nation to fall. Our debt is $33 trillion. I mean, you're listening to these? Welfare. Take control of every else aspect of their life. Who started the welfare state? FDR. I mean, this goes back far. Education. Take control of the education system. Why do they want to keep control of the Department of Education? I mean, this is right here. Two of them that I want to really focus on, because I did 6 of them. There's 8 of them. Oh, no, religion. I did 5 of them. Remove the belief of God from all government institutions and schools. I mean, this is what they did.
Yep.
The 2 most important one, right? Class welfare. If you can keep the people in the nation constantly fighting each other like they did in the French Revolution, like they did in the Soviet Union before it was a Soviet Union. If people are constantly focusing on each other, black versus white, gender, male versus woman, trans versus cisgender, Islam versus Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, you notice we're always focused on fighting us and what separates us. And I'll talk one more thing about that after I go on the one that's saving us. Actually, I'll say it now. I spoke at a Republican event the other day, and I was talking about inner Republican battles, right? I said, can we all agree, because some of the people said, we're America first, we're establishment. Now the Republicans are divided, right? I said, is there a war on Christianity? Yes. I said, how many people here are Baptists? They started raising their hand. How many people are Lutheran, raising their hand? I said, but there's not a war on Baptists. There's not a war on Lutherans or Catholics. It's a war on Christianity. So why divide yourself? There is a war on, we should be all together fighting against this war on Christianity rather than dividing ourselves up by the sect within in that religion. And that's how you weaken us, is constantly let people identify as different things. That's that 8th level of control that takes down the nation. If you can get everyone so focused on those
identity politics, right?
And the last one is gun control. You must disarm the people. If you look at, sir, those 8 levels of control, that goes back generations. This is not a joke. This is how you take down a society, and they have 7 of them deadlocked. Thank God Trump came in, and he's dismantling of all the things going on right now. Dismantling that Department of Education is the number one thing protecting. I agree. Because we just reduced it to 6. So this is big. And this big movement, and you notice the NGOs and the WEF, what are they doing in terms of migration? They're pushing Africans into America. They're pushing Middle Eastern Africans all over the world. We got to get them out of Africa and put them in the developed nations, and Middle Eastern and Muslims. Why? Because conservative Muslims, Islamists will never assimilate. So when they come into this country, they come into a little group, then they expand.
Creates division.
Yeah, and then they create little communities for themselves where they institute Sharia law, and they use the Constitution against us to say we're allowed to do this. Then what happens? You don't want to live within a mile of that place. So then you move, and it expands and expands. And they never want to be Americans. They talk about death to America. America's no good. You must live by the Quran. You're the infidel. You should be paying taxes. This stuff is by design. The World Economic Forum, the globalists are purposely sticking people in here that will never, ever be American. And they're here only to keep dividing us. So we're not focused on the trillions of dollars they've been sending all over this world and laundering back to themselves to make them the elites who will be in control. So I rambled there, but this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
And it's going to take us down.
Yeah. I've read a number of really good books just in the last year specifically on that. One of them that I recently read, Control Oligarchs by Seamus Bruner. Excellent book. And he gets into the details of that and really, these globalist elites and, what the ideology is that's driving them. And basically, it's an anti-human agenda is what it is. They want to reduce the population. They want to turn, the remaining non-elites into serfs, and be controllers of the universe. I mean, it's megalomania.
Yeah.
And the scary thing is the amount of power and money that they have acquired, and the way that our system is set up here in the United States, where politicians get elected by, largely by advertisement. And so it requires a ton of money. A lot of these politicians do get beholden to the interests of those that don't have America's best interest at heart.
They're all millionaires.
Yeah.
So in their mind, they're being told by Soros, you stick to this ideology, stick to this agenda, I'll finance your campaigns. You see what they're doing with Act Blue. I mean, there is a serious conspiracy here, and they're told you will be part of our ruling elite. You'll be part of the ruling class. Jasmine Crockett, how is she a millionaire? And they're promised that, and now they're hooked. They can never. John Roberts, I guarantee you, John Roberts is part of that club.
Well, they've this is part of the problem I've been talking about for years. I worked at one of my jobs was working for Marfor Cyber. I was on a cyber protection team. I got read on to Section 702 FISA, intelligence authorities. I know the kinds of capabilities that we have when it comes to surveillance, and those capabilities were never intended to be used on American citizens, but we know for a fact that they have been. In fact, they've been using it. There was a judge that announced that there were over 257,000 illegal uses of 702 to spy on American citizens. That's just the ones that we know about. The IG has said there's been millions of illegal spying on American citizens. Now, when they do this, I can only assume that they're doing it for one reason. It's J. Edgar Hoover on steroids. They basically have dirt on everyone. And so that way they can control and manipulate them. And I guarantee you that includes judges. It includes members of Congress. It includes, presidents of companies and executives. It includes even members of the Supreme Court.
I would add to that, it includes every single one of us. So if it comes down to them having to do this by force, we know exactly where to send the FBI agent. Let's just say let's just say Biden won and they want to make it a martial, martial order. And they want to come after the people who would fight back. They're preemptively, they know where we are.
Well, there was a whistleblower that came out of the ATF the other day and talked about how they've been collecting all of this data that they're supposed to destroy, which comes through they're not allowed to have a gun registry, but they have a background check system, and that background check system is supposed to be wiped clean. They've not been wiping it clean. They've been collecting all of that data, so they know everybody who's been applying for, owning a gun. And they've been using that as a, quote unquote, quasi registry. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. And it is exactly the sorts of things that, to get to that other pillar that you were talking about, about gun control, they got to know where the guns are so they know who to go after.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, we've got a few more minutes before you got to go here, but I just want to quickly ask you, we've talked about a lot of different things, and I always like to ask my guests, when they walk away after watching this show, what do you want them to walk away with, and what do you want them to take from our conversation?
Now, I tell this to all the officers and veterans for America First. You know, you ever watch the superheroes, like you have the Batman and you have Iron Man? They're very calculating, right? Strategic. You have, but you have like Hulk and Thor, who are their powers are anger. Like the angrier Hulk gets, the stronger he gets. And I like to say, you have to stay angry. You can't get comfortable anymore in this country. Those days are over. Let your anger fuel your drive. Be calculating, be strategic. But you notice, like, when you're angry, all your emotions are up. You're more alert when you're angry. Like, stay angry and understand that they're coming for you. They're coming for your kids. They're going to control you. Going to take everything you have, your 401ks, your pensions. They want everything under their control. That should anger you. They're telling you, I have a 10-year-old son. They're telling them they can be girls. That angers me. Forget the golfing. Do that once or twice a year. Forget the ski trips once a month. Do that once or twice a year and stay engaged. Because if you're not going to stay angry, you're not going to care. And the only time you're angry is when it personally affects you. So thinking about your friends and your community. And if something, I had to go to the school district the other day and fight because one of the ladies, little elementary school kids, they took away his Chromebook. He wasn't allowed to take it home as a punishment. I said, you can't take that away. You have no right. Like, get angry. I think anger right now is what's going to drive us through the next decade, to these Gen Z guys who are very patriotic. That's our saving grace. Until they get into these positions like you were talking about, FBI and DIA and CIA. Those Gen Z guys are like us.
Yep.
I think they're going to save America. So stay angry until they take control. And when you're 70, relax. That's my plan.
I agree with you. That. Well, hey, I always like to end my show with prayer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And then we'll close this show right now. Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you for Captain Cornicelli and the work that he is doing to help our veterans. Lord, I pray that you would bless his endeavors. I pray you'd help him to be successful at that. Lord, I pray for our country. We lift up our president. We lift up our veterans, Lord. We just pray, God, that you would place the right people in the right positions to help with this problem, especially with suicide and homelessness and substance abuse. There's so many problems that are going on that are just we're not finding the best answers to. And God, I know that there are better answers and solutions to these problems. And I pray you would help us with that. Help us to be alert. Help us to have righteous anger at these attacks on our freedoms, at these attacks on what has made this nation a righteous and great nation that has done so much for the rest of the world. Lord, help us to remain that light shining on the hill and to help us to be, once again, a great nation that blesses the whole earth. Lord, I just pray your blessing over everybody that is watching the show today. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us. Where can people follow you, Captain?
So I'm on Substack. I'm on Twitter, Captain C for America First. I'm on Facebook, all those social media platforms. Substack is where I really like to write a little more in depth on these issues.
Great.
But I have to say, you got a great show. You're a great patriot. I'm sorry you went through all these things with the VA and the FBI, and I pray everything works out for you. You're a good man.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know what? I'm glad that you said about staying angry, because I agree with you. I think that is the key, is having righteous anger and basically using it as fuel to help you stay engaged. Because the fact is that we have been far too long lulled asleep in this country. We've had it too easy. And what is it? It says that in that final saying, hard times create good men, right? So that is what we're in right now. And hopefully what we come out of this is, I think we've got a generation of people that are going to turn our country around and bring us back to that, to that shining city on a hill where we are a blessing to the world. God bless you, and God bless everybody that is listening and is following. And remember, stay angry and put that anger to work to help save this country. God bless.
Raise some Cain. Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.